Sir, what's your take on the calls for the suspension of the excise tax on fuels to have at least an impact on the consumers' pockets? But can the government afford this since they get, of course, revenues from that to also fund our twinning deficits and especially our COVID response?
Since our debt to GDP has actually breached 60% already, it's very dangerous from the perspective of the whole nation. We understand the concern of those calling for the suspension of the excise tax on oil. However, as if you suspend it, it will be very hard to bring it back. On the other hand, we project that it will just only last for a couple of months. So having that cost benefit analysis, it would be more favorable for all of us, no, to just bite the bullet and pray it will normalize sooner than what we forecast, and continue collecting those important tax revenues to finance very important government programs on vaccination, health support, infrastructure. So we shouldn't be delaying all these health and pump priming programs of the government, and we shouldn't be relying for additional loans to finance these programs. No? So it's very difficult to bring
Mhm.
it back once you've suspended it. So I think
Okay.
we shouldn't.
Okay, sir, speaking of those loans, our outstanding debt is at a new all-time high. That's 11.92 trillion pesos. Are you worried? Is this something that compared to other countries, when you look at the debt to GDP ratio, it's manageable? But in our case, as you mentioned, we're running out of ways to fund it apart from tapping, offshore debt markets. Is this cause for concern? Can we still borrow more? Is there room for the deficit to grow to be able to fund, of course, the recovery strategy?
Two things, no. Number one, it's a ratio. It's a debt over GDP. So the it will be alarming if our GDP continues to go down, to continues to shrink. So the most direct solution for this is to increase our GDP, and so therefore it is worrisome, but a little bit. So our fiscal crisis debt to GDP rate is around 73% way back in 2004. So we're still far from there. So it's not alarming. It's worrisome, but it's not alarming, and we can still do something about it. And how do we address it? By actually enlarging our GDP. And so therefore the race to open up the economy, spur jobs, job generation, to increase the denominator, to make sure our whole debt to GDP ratio goes down. No? So I think we can still there's still space to borrow more, especially if we are already projecting some good numbers for our fourth quarter GDP for the and then for the rest of the year. But it would be very very prudent. No? It should be very very prudent, together with our intensified tax collection, especially now that some businesses are able to open and are able to file their tax returns.